Hello. Welcome back. We're going to continue on. I didn't take as much of a peek ahead to see what is in store for today, but I'm pretty sure things are going to pick up. So I hope you're ready. Alright, so first, before we get started, please just let me know how the volume is. And to answer your question, where did we get the scene from? You've been looking for it everywhere. Well, I'm glad you asked. You see FabJab there in our chat, and he is a visual artist, and he created this for me specifically for this stream. So something visually appealing to look at while we do our readings. And we're gonna probably do some more customized scenes depending on the stories that we come up with to read on stream. So it's be something to look forward to. But yeah, it's a custom creation, so you probably won't find it out there. But you can find our socials for our company, Mixed Creatives, in my panels and whatnot, and it's linked up to my Twitter and whatnot as well. So we do graphics and visuals for all different kinds. So it's nice to be able to put some of that work to use on my stream as well. It's like a side perk. Alright, so the volume is good. Alright, let's get started. Alright. So I found out that this whole story really just spans over the course of 4 days. So we have read through all of the activities for the first 2 days of the story. So again, we started on Tuesday, December 30th, and then last time we read through Wednesday, December 31st. And today we are going to read through the story as it unfolds for Thursday, January 1st. Tina stayed the night with Elliot, and he realized that he had forgotten how pleasant it could be to share his bed with someone with whom he cared truly. He had had other women in his bed during the past 2 years, and a few had stayed the night, but not one of those other lovers had made him feel content merely by the fact of her presence, as Tina did. With her, sex was a delightful bonus, but it wasn't the main reason he wanted her beside him. She was an excellent lover, silken, smooth, and uninhibited in the pursuit of her own pleasure. But she was also vulnerable and kind. The vague, shadowy shape of her under the covers, in the darkness, was a talisman to ward off the loneliness. Eventually he fell asleep. At 4 o'clock in the morning, he was awakened by cries of distress. She sat up straight, the sheets knotted in her fists. Catapulted out of a nightmare, she was quaking, gasping about a man dressed all in black. The monstrous figure from her dream. Elliot switched on the bedside lamp to prove to her that they were alone in the room. She had told him about the dreams, but he hadn't realized until now how terrible they were. The exhumation of Danny's body would be good for her, regardless of the horror that she might have to confront when the coffin lid was raised. If seeing the remains put an end to these blood-curdling nightmares, she would gain an advantage from the grim experience. He switched off the bedside lamp and persuaded her to lie down again. He held her until she stopped shuddering. To his surprise, her fear rapidly changed to desire. They fell easily into the pace and rhythm that had earlier best pleased them. Afterward, they slipped into sleep again. Over breakfast, he had asked her to go with him to the afternoon party, at which he was going to corner Judge Kennebec to ask about the exhumation. But Tina wanted to go back to her place and clean out Danny's room. She felt up to the challenge now, and she intended to finish the task before she lost her nerve again. "We'll see each other tonight, though, won't we?" he asked. "Yes. I'll cook for you again." She smiled. "In what sense do you mean that?" She rose out of her chair, leaned across the table, and kissed him. The smell of her, the vibrant blue of her eyes, the feel of her supple skin as he put a hand to her face, those things generated waves of affection and longing with him. He walked her to her Honda in the driveway and leaned in the window after she was behind the wheel, delaying her for another 15 minutes while he planned, to her satisfaction, every dish of this evening's dinner. When at last she drove away, he watched her car until it turned the corner and disappeared, and when she was gone, he knew why he had not wanted to let her go. He had been trying to postpone her departure because he was afraid that he would never see her again after she drove off. He had no rational reason to entertain such dark thoughts. Certainly, the unknown person who was harassing Tina might have violent intentions, but Tina herself didn't think there was any serious danger, and Elliot tended to agree with her. The malicious tormentor wanted her to suffer mental anguish and spiritual pain, and he didn't want her to die, because that would spoil his fun. The fear Elliot felt at her departure was purely superstitious. He was convinced that, with her arrival on the scene, he had been granted too much happiness, too fast, too soon, too easily. He had an awful suspicion that fate was setting him up for another hard fall. He was afraid Tina Evans would be taken away from him just as Nancy had been. Unsuccessfully trying to shrug off the grim premonition, he went into the house. He spent an hour and a half in his library, paging through legal casebooks, boning up on the precedents for the exhumation of the body, as the court had put it, was to be disinterred in the absence of pressing legal need, solely for humane reasons, in consideration of certain survivals of the deceased. Elliot didn't think Harold Kennebec would give him any trouble, and he didn't expect the judge to request a list of precedents for something as relatively simple and harmless as reopening Danny's grave, but he intended to be well prepared. In Army intelligence, Kennebec had been a fair but always demanding superior officer. At 1 o'clock, Elliot drove his silver Mercedes S600 sports coupe to the New Year's Day party on Sunrise Mountain. The sky was blue and clear, and he wished he had had time to take the Cessna up for a few hours. This was perfect flying weather, one of those crystalline days when, being above the earth, would make him feel clean and free. On Sunday, when the exhumation was out of the way, maybe he would fly Tina to Arizona or to Los Angeles for the day. We have to take a little bit of a break because I have... It seems like we're missing part of this page. Let's see if I could pull it up in the PDF file as well. Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. Alright, here we go. On Sunrise Mountain, most of the big, expensive houses featured natural landscaping, which meant rocks, colored stones, and artfully arranged cacti instead of grass, shrubs, and trees. In acknowledgement that man's grip on this portion of the desert was new and perhaps tenuous. At night, the view of Las Vegas from the mountainside was undeniably spectacular. But Elliot couldn't understand what other reasons anyone could possibly have for choosing to live here rather than the city's older, greener neighborhoods. On hot summer days, these barren, sandy slopes seemed God-forsaken. They had not been made lush and green for another 10 years at least. On the brown hills, the huge houses thrust like bleak monuments of an ancient dead religion. The residents of Sunrise Mountain could expect to share their patios and decks and pools with occasional visiting scorpions, tarantulas, and rattlesnakes. On windy days, the dusk was as thick and as fog, and it pushed its dirty little cat feet under doors, around windows, and through attic vents. The party was at a large Tuscan-style house, halfway up the slopes. A three-sided, fan-shaped tent had been erected on the back lawn to one side of a 60-foot pool, with the open side facing the house. An 18-piece orchestra performed at the rear in a striped canvas structure. Approximately 200 guests danced and milled about behind the house, and another 100 partied within the 20 rooms. Many of the faces were familiar to Elliot. Half of the guests were attorneys and their wives. Although a judicial purist might have disapproved, prosecutors and public defenders and tax attorneys and criminal lawyers and corporate counsel were mingling and getting pleasantly drunk with the judges for whom they'd argue cases almost every week. Las Vegas had a judicial style and standards of its own. After 20 minutes of diligent mixing, Elliot found Harold Kennebec. The judge was a tall, dour-looking man with curly white hair. He greeted Elliot warmly, and they talked about their mutual interests: cooking, flying, and river rafting. Elliot didn't want to ask Kennebec for a favor without hearing of a dozen lawyers, or within hearing of a dozen lawyers, and today there was nowhere in the house where they could be assured of privacy. They went outside and strolled down the street, past the partygoers' cars, which ran the gamut from Rolls-Royce to Range Rovers. Kennebec listened with interest to Elliot's unofficial feeler about the chances of getting Danny's grave reopened. Elliot didn't tell the judge about the malicious prankster, for that seemed like an unnecessary complication. He still believed that once the fact of Danny's death was established by the exhumation, the quickest and surest way of dealing with the harassment was to hire a first-rate firm of private investigators to track down the perpetrator. Now, for the judge's benefit, and to explain why an exhumation had suddenly become such a vital matter, Elliot exaggerated the anguish and confusion that Tina had undergone as a direct consequence of never having seen the body of her child. Henry Kennebec had a poker face that also looked like a poker. Hard and plain, dark, and it was difficult to tell if he had any sympathy whatsoever for Tina's plight. As he and Elliot ambled along the sun-splashed street, Kennebec mulled over the problem in silence for almost a minute. At last he said, "What about the father?" "I was hoping you wouldn't ask." "Ah," Kennebec said. "The father will protest." "You're positive?" "Yes." "On religious grounds?" "No. There was a bitter divorce shortly before." "Michael Evans hates his ex-wife." "Ah, so he'd contest the exhumation for no other reason but to cause her grief?" "That's right," Elliot said. "No other reason. No legitimate reason. Still, I've got to consider the father's wishes. As long as there aren't any religious objections, the law requires the permission of only one parent in a case like this," Elliot said. "Nevertheless, I have a duty to protect everyone's interests in the matter. If the father has a chance to protest," Elliot said, "we'll probably get involved in a knock-down, drag-out legal battle. It'll tie up a hell of a lot of the court's time." "I wouldn't like that," Kennebec said thoughtfully. "The court's calendar is overloaded now. We simply don't have enough judges or enough money. The system's creaking and groaning. And when the dust finally settles," Elliot said, "my client will win the right to exhume the body anyway." "Probably." "Definitely," Elliot said. "Her husband would be engaged in nothing more than a spiteful obstructionism. In the process of trying to hurt his ex-wife, he'd waste several days of the court's time, and the end result would be exactly the same as if he had never been given a chance to protest." "Ah," Kennebec said, frowning slightly. They stopped at the end of the next block. Kennebec stood with his eyes closed and his face turned up to the warm winter sun, and at last the judge said, "You're asking me to cut corners." "Not really. Simply issue an exhumation order on the mother's request. The law allows it." "You want the order right away, I assume." "Tomorrow morning, if possible." "And you'll have the grave reopened by tomorrow afternoon?" "Saturday by the latest." "Before the father can get a restraining order from another judge," Kennebec said. "If there's no hitch, maybe the father wouldn't even find out about the exhumation." "Ah, everyone benefits. The court saves a lot of time and effort. My client is spared a great deal of unnecessary anguish, and her husband saves a bundle in attorney's fees that he'd be just throwing away in a hopeless attempt to stop us." Kennebec said. In silence, they walked back to the house, where the party was getting louder by the minute. In the middle of the block, Kennebec finally said, "I'll have to chew on it for a while, Elliot." "How long?" "Oh, well, will you be here all afternoon?" "I doubt it. With all these attorneys, it's sort of a busman's holiday, don't you think?" "Going home from here?" Kennebec asked. "Yes." He pushed a curly strand of white hair from his forehead. Then I'll call you at home this evening. Can you at least tell me how you're leaning? In your favor, I suppose. You know I'm right, Harry. Kennebec smiled. I've heard your argument, Counselor. Let's leave it at that for now. I'll call you this evening after I've had a chance to think about it. At least Kennebec hadn't refused the request. Nevertheless, Elliot had expected a quicker and more satisfying response. He wasn't asking the judge for much of a favor. Besides, the two of them went back a long way indeed. He knew that Kennebec was a cautious man, but usually not excessively so. The judge's hesitation in this relatively simple matter struck Elliot as odd, but he said nothing more. He had no choice but to wait for Kennebec's call. As they approached the house, they talked about the delights of pasta served with a thin, light sauce of olive oil, garlic, and sweet basil. Elliot remained at the party for only 2 hours. There were too many attorneys and not enough civilians to make the bash interesting. Everywhere he went, he heard talks about torts, rights, briefs, suits, countersuits, motions for continuance, appeals, plea bargaining, and the latest tax shelters. The conversations were like those in which he was involved at work, 8 or 9, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and he didn't intend to spend a holiday nattering about the same damn things. By 4 o'clock he was home again, working in the kitchen. Tina was supposed to arrive at 6. They had a few chores to finish before she came, so they wouldn't have to spend a lot of time doing galley labor as they had done last night. Standing at the kitchen, he peeled and chopped a small onion, cleaned 6 stalks of celery, and peeled several slender carrots. He had just opened a bottle of balsamic vinegar and poured 4 ounces into a measuring cup when he heard movement behind him. Turning, he saw a strange man enter the kitchen from the dining room. The man was about 5 feet 8, with a narrow face and a neatly trimmed blonde beard. He wore a dark blue suit, white shirt, and a blue tie, and he carried a physician's bag. He was nervous. "What the hell?" Elliot said. The second man appeared behind the first. He was considerably more formidable than his associate, tall, rough-edged, with large, big-knuckled, leathery hands, like something that had escaped from a recombinant DNA lab experimenting in the crossbreeding of human beings with bears. In freshly pressed slacks, a crisp blue shirt, a patterned tie, and a gray sports jacket, he might have been a professional hitman uncomfortably gotten up for the baptism of his mafia don's grandchild. But he didn't appear to be nervous at all. "What's this?" Elliot demanded. Both intruders stopped near the fridge, 12 or 14 feet from Elliot. The small man fidgeted and the tall man smiled. "How did you get in here?" A lock-release gun," the tall man said, smiling cordially and nodding. "Bob here," he indicated the smaller man, "has the neatest set of tools. Makes things easier. What the hell is this about?" "Relax," said the tall man. "I don't keep a lot of money here." No, the tall man said. It's not money." Bob shook his head in agreement, frowning as if he was dismayed to think that he could be mistaken for a common thief. "Just relax," the tall man repeated. "You've got the wrong guy," Elliot assured them. "You're the one, all right." "Yep, you," Bob said. "You're the one. There's no mistake." The conversation had a disoriented quality of an off-kilter exchange between Alice and the scrawny denizens of Wonderland. Putting down the vinegar bottle and picking up the knife, Elliot said, "Get the fuck out of here!" "Calm down, Mr. Stryker," the tall one said. Yes, please, calm down," Bob said. Elliot took a step toward them. The tall man pulled a silencer-equipped pistol out of the shoulder holster that was concealed under his gray sports jacket. "Easy, just take it real easy, nice and easy." Elliot backed up against the sink. "That's better," the tall man said. "Much better," Bob said. "Put the knife down and we'll all be happy." "Let's keep this happy," Bob agreed. "Yeah, nice and happy." The Mad Hatter would be along any minute now. "Down with the knife," the tall man said. Come on. Finally, Elliot put it down. Push it across the counter. Out of reach. Elliot did as he told. "Who are you guys?" "As long as you cooperate, you won't get hurt," the tall man assured him. Bob said, "Let's get on with it, Vince." "Vince," the tall man said, "we'll use the breakfast area over there in the corner." Bob went to the round maple table. He put down the black physician's bag, opened it, and withdrew a compact cassette tape recorder. He removed other things from the bag too. A length of flexible rubber tubing, something for monitoring blood pressure, 2 small bottles of amber-colored fluid, and a packet of disposable syringes. Elliot's mind raced through the list of cases that his law firm were currently handling, searching for some connection with these 2 intruders, but he couldn't think of one. The tall man gestured with the gun. "Go over to the table and sit down. Not until you tell me what this is about. I'm giving the orders here, but I'm not taking them. I'll put a hole in you if you don't move." "No, you won't do that." Sorry guys, my pages are not loading up properly. They're a little bit slow to load for some reason. Today I'll have to check to see what's causing that, but try to keep it moving along as smoothly as we can. "Move your ass over to the table. Not until you explain yourself." Vince glared at him. Elliot met the stranger's eyes and didn't look away. At last Vince said, "Be reasonable. We just gotta ask you some questions." Determined not to let them see he was frightened, aware that any sign of fear would be taken as proof of weakness, Elliot said, "Well, you've got one hell of a weird approach for someone who's just taken a public opinion survey. Move." "What are the needles for? Move, what are they for?" Vince sighed. "We gotta be sure you tell us the truth." "Drugs?" Elliot asked. "They're effective and reliable," said Bob. "And when you're finished, I'll have a brain of a consistency of grape jelly." No, Bob said. "These drugs won't do any lasting physical or mental damage." "What sort of questions?" "I'm losing my patience with you. It's mutual." "Move!" Elliot didn't move an inch. He refused to look at the muzzle of the pistol. He wanted them to think the guns didn't scare him. Instead, he was vibrating like a tuning fork. "You son of a bitch, move! What sort of questions do you want to ask me?" The big man scowled. Bob said, "For Christ's sakes, Vince, tell him. He's gonna hear the questions anyway when he finally sits down. Let's get this over with and split." Vince scratched his concrete block's chin with his shovel of a hand, and then reached inside his jacket. From an inner pocket, he withdrew a few sheets of folded typing paper. The gun wavered, but it didn't move off target far enough for Elliot to give Elliot a chance. I'm supposed to ask you every question on this list, Vince said, folding the paper. It's a lot, like 30 or 40 questions altogether, but it won't take long if you just sit down over there and cooperate. Questions about what? Christina Evans. That was the last thing Elliot expected. He was dumbfounded. Tina Evans, what about her? Got to know why she wants her little boy's grave reopened. Elliot stared at him and mused. How do you know about that? Never mind. Yeah, never mind how we know. The important thing is we do know. Are you the bastards who've been harassing Tina? Huh? Are you the ones who keep sending her messages? What messages? Are you the ones who wrecked the boy's room? What are you talking about? We haven't heard any of this. Someone sending messages about the kid? Bob asked. They appeared to be genuinely surprised by the news, and Elliot was pretty sure they weren't the people who had been trying to scare Tina. Besides, though they both struck him as slightly wacky, they didn't seem to be merely hoaxers or borderline psychopaths who got their kicks by scarring defenseless women. They looked and acted like organization men. Even the big one was rough enough at the edges to pass for a common thug. The silencer-equipped pistol, lock-release gun, truth serums. Their apparatus indicated that these guys were part of a sophisticated outfit with substantial resources. What about the messages she's been getting? Vince asked, still watching Elliot closely. I guess that's just one more question you're not going to get an answer for, Elliot said. We'll get the answer, Vince said coldly. We'll get all the answers. Now, Counselor, are you going to walk over to the table and sit your ass down, or am I going to have to motivate you with this? He gestured with his pistol again. Kennebec, Elliot said, startled with sudden. The only way you could have found out about the exhumation so quickly is if Kennebec told you. The two men glanced at each other. They were unhappy to hear the judge's name. Who? Vince asked, but it was too late to cover the revealing look they had exchanged. That's why he stalled me, Elliot said. He wanted to give you time to get to me. What in the hell should Kennebec care whether or not Danny's grave is reopened? Why should you care? Who the hell are you people? The escapee from the island of Dr. Moreau was suddenly no longer merely impatient. He was angry. Listen, you stupid fuck. I'm not gonna humor you any longer. I'm not gonna answer any more questions, but I am gonna put a bullet in your crotch if you don't move to the table and sit down. Elliot pretended not to have heard the threat. The pistol still frightened him, but he was now thinking of something else that scared him more than the gun. The chill spread from the base of his spine up his back as he realized what the presence of these men implied about the accident that had killed Danny. There's something about Danny's death, something strange about the way all those scouts died. The truth of it isn't like the version everyone's told, the bus accident. That's a lie, isn't it? Neither man answered him. The truth is a lot worse, Elliot said. Something so terrible that some powerful people want to hush it up. Kennebec, once an agent, always an agent. Which set of letters do you work for? Not the FBI. They're all Ivy Leaguers these days, polished, educated. Same for the CIA. You're too crude. Not the CID, for sure. There's no intelligent military discipline about you. Let me guess, you work for some set of letters the public hasn't even heard about yet. Something scary and dirty. Vince's eyes darkened like a slab of spam on a hot griddle. God damn it, I said you were going to answer the questions. For now on. Relax. I've played your game. I was Army intelligence back when. I'm not exactly an outsider. I know how this works. The rules, the moves. You don't have to be so hard-ass with me. Open up. Give me a break and I'll give you a break. Eventually sensing Vince's onrushing blow-up and aware that it wouldn't help them to accomplish their mission, Bob quickly said, "Listen, Stryker. We can't answer most of your questions because we don't know. Yes, we work for a government agency. Yes, it's one you've never heard of and probably never will. But we don't know why Danny Evans is so important. We haven't been told the details, not even half of them, and we don't want to know all of it either. You understand what I'm saying? The less a guy knows, the less he can be nailed for it later. Christ, we're not big shots in this outfit. We're strictly hired help. They only tell us as much as we need to know. So will you cool it? Just come over here, sit down, let me inject you, give us a few answers, and we can all get on with our lives. We can't just stand here forever." "If you're working for the government intelligence agency, then go away and come back with legal papers," Elliot said. "Show me search warrants and subpoenas." "You know better than that," Vince said. "The agency we work for doesn't officially exist. So how can an agency that doesn't exist go to court for a subpoena? Get serious, Mr. Stryker. If I do submit to the drug, what happens to me after you got your answers?" Elliot asked. "Nothing. Nothing at all. How can I be sure?" At this indication of imminent surrender, the tall man relaxed slightly, although his lumpus face was still flushed with anger. "I told you, when we got what we want, we'll leave. We just have to find out exactly why the Evans woman wants the grave reopened. We have to know if someone's ratted to her. If someone has, then we gotta spike his ass to the barn door. But we don't have anything against you, not personally, you know. After we find out what we want to know, we'll leave." "And let me go to the police?" Elliot asked. "No. If you bastards want me to sit down at that table, you're gonna have to drag me there." It is getting interesting now. So we're on to the next little subchapter. It's just the pace today is a little bit interesting for me. So having to read all these male voices and dialogue back and forth, but yeah, I'll get better at this with time. And anyhow, it's try not to like be super overly dramatic with some of the dialogue, but also do the lines, read the lines in such a way that is a little bit more involved and convincing. So, but I realize there are always going to be parts of a story that might not be best suited for me. But like I said, it'll come with practice. Next chapter. Tina resolutely cleaned up the mess in Danny's room and packed his belongings. He intended to donate everything to Goodwill Industries. Sometimes she was on the verge of tears at the sight of one object or another, and released a flood of memories. She gritted her teeth, however, and restrained the urge to leave the room with the job uncompleted. Not much remained to be done. Contents of 3 cartons in the back of a deep closet had to be sorted. She tried to lift one of them, but it was too heavy. She dragged it into the bedroom, across the carpet, onto the shafts of goldish red afternoon sunlight that filtered through the sheltering trees outside, and then through the dust-filmed window. When she opened the carton, she saw that it contained part of Danny's collection of comic books and graphic novels. They were mostly horror comics. She had never been able to understand this morbid streak in him. Monster movies, horror comics, vampire novels, scary stories of every kind, in every medium. Initially, his growing fascination with the macabre had not seemed entirely healthy to her, but she had never denied him the freedom to pursue it. Most of his friends had shared his avid interest in ghosts and ghouls. Besides, the grotesque hadn't been his only interest, so she decided not to worry about it. In the carton were 2 stacks of comic books, and the 2 issues on top sported gruesome, full-colored covers. On the first, a black carriage drawn by 4 black horses with evil, glaring eyes rushed along a night highway beneath a gibbous moon, and headless men held the reins, urging the frenzied horses forward. Bright blood streamed from the ragged stump of the coachman's neck, and the gelatinous clots of blood clung to his white ruffled shirt. His grisly head stood on the driver's seat beside him, grinning fiendishly, filled with malevolent life, even though it had been brutally severed from his body. Tina grimaced. If this was what Danny had read before going to bed at night, how had he been able to sleep so well? He had always been a deep, unmoving sleeper, never troubled by bad dreams. She dragged another carton out of the closet. It was heavy as the first, and she figured it contained more comic books. But she opened it to be sure. She gasped in shock. He was glaring up at her from inside the box, from the cover of a graphic novel. Him, the man dressed all in black, the same face, mostly skull and withered flesh, prominent sockets of bone, and the menacing, inhumane crimson eyes staring out with intense hatred. The cluster of maggots squirming on his cheek at the corner of one eye. The rotten yellow-toothed grin. In every repulsive detail, he was precisely like the hideous creature that stalked her nightmares. How could she have dreamed about this hideous creature just last night, and to find it here, for her today, only hours later? She stepped back from the cardboard box. The burning scarlet eyes of the monstrous figure in the drawing seemed to follow her. She must have seen this lurid cover illustration when Danny had first brought the magazine into the house. The memory of it fixed into her subconscious, festering until she eventually incorporated it into her nightmares. That seemed to be the only logical explanation. But she knew it wasn't true. She had never seen this drawing before. When Danny had first begun collecting horror comics with his allowance, she had closely examined those books to decide whether or not they were harmful to him. But after she had made up her mind to let him read such stuff, she had never thereafter even glanced at his purchases. Yet she had dreamed about the man in black. And here he was, grinning at her. Curious about the story from which the illustration had been taken, Tina stepped to the box again to pluck out the graphic novel. It was thicker than a comic book and printed on slick paper. As her fingers touched the glossy cover, a bell rang. She flinched and gasped. The bell rang again, and she realized that someone was at the front door. Heart thumping, she went to the foyer. Through the fish eyes lens in the door, she saw a young, clean-cut man wearing a blue cap with an unidentifiable emblem on it. He was smiling, waiting to be acknowledged. She didn't open the door. "What do you want?" "Gas repair company. We need to check your lines where they come into your house." Tina frowned. "On New Year's Day?" "Emergency crew," the repairman said through the closed door. "We're investigating a possible gas leak in the neighborhood." She hesitated, but then opened the door without removing the heavy-duty security chain. She studied him through the narrow gap. "Gas leak?" He smiled reassuringly. "There probably isn't any danger. We've lost some pressure in our lines and we're trying to find the cause of it. No reason to evacuate people or panic or anything, but we're just checking every house. Do you have a gas stove in the kitchen?" "No, electric." "What about the heating system?" "Yes, it's a gas furnace." "Yeah, I think all the houses in this area have gas furnaces. I'd better have a look at it, check the fittings and the incoming feed, all that." She looked him over carefully. He was wearing a gas company uniform and he was carrying a large toolkit with a gas company emblem on it. She said, "Can I see some identification?" "Sure." From his shirt pocket, he withdrew a laminated ID card from the gas company seal. His picture, his name, and his physical statistics. Feeling slightly foolish and like an easily spooked old woman, Tina said, "I'm sorry. It's not that you strike me as a dangerous person or anything. Hey, it's okay. Don't apologize. You did the right thing asking for ID. These days, you're crazy if you're opening your door without knowing exactly who's on the other side of it." She closed the door long enough to slip off the security chain, and then she opened it again and stepped back. "Come in." "Where's the furnace? In the garage?" Few Vegas homes had basements. "Yes, the garage. If you want, I could just go in through the garage door." "No, that's all right. Come in." He stepped across the threshold. She closed and locked the door. "Nice place you got here." "Thank you." "Cozy, good sense of color. All these earth tones, I like it. It's a bit like our house. My wife has a real good sense of color." "It's relaxing," Tina said. "Isn't it? So nice and natural." "The garage is this way," she said. He followed her past the kitchen, into the short hall, into the laundry room, and from there into the garage. Tina switched on the light. The darkness was dispelled. The shadows remained along the walls and in the corners. The garage was slightly musty, but Tina was unable to detect the odor of gas. "Doesn't smell like there's trouble here," she said. "You're probably right, but you can never tell. It could be an underground break in your property. Gas might be leaking under the concrete slab and building up down here, in which case it's possible you wouldn't detect it right away, but you'd be sitting on top of a bomb." What a lovely thought. Makes life interesting. "It's a good thing you're not working in the gas company's public relations department." He laughed. "Don't worry, if I really believed there was even the tiniest chance of anything like that, I wouldn't be standing here so cheerfully." "I guess not." "You can bet on it. Really, don't worry. This is just going to be a routine check." He went to the furnace, put his huge toolkit on the floor, and hunkered down. He opened a hinged plate, exposing the furnace's workings. A ring of brilliant, pulsating flame was visible in there, and it bathed his face in an eerie blue light. "Well?" she said. He looked up at her. "This will take me maybe 15 or 20 minutes." "Oh, I thought it was just a simple thing." It's best to be thorough in a situation like this. By all means, be thorough. Hey, if you've got something to do, feel free to go ahead with it. I won't be needing anything. Tina thought of the graphic novel with the man in black on its cover. She was curious about the story of which that creature had stepped, for she had a particular feeling that in some way it would be similar to the story of Danny's death. It was a bizarre notion, and she didn't know where it had come from, but she couldn't dispel it. Well, she said, I was cleaning the back room. If you're sure, oh, certainly. Go ahead, don't let me interrupt your housework. She left him there in the shadowy garage, his face painted by the shimmering blue light, his eyes gleaming with two reflections of fire. Next chapter. When Elliot refused to move away from the sink to the breakfast table in the far corner of the big kitchen, Bob, the smaller of the two men, hesitated, then reluctantly took a step toward him. Wait, Vince said. Bob stopped, obviously relieved that his hulking accomplice was going to deal with Elliot. Don't get in my way, Vince advised. He tucked the sheaf of typewritten questions into his coat pocket. Let me handle this bastard. Bob retreated to the table, and Elliot turned his attention to the larger intruder. Vince held the pistol in his right hand and made a fist with his left. You really want to do this? You want to tangle with me, little man? Hell, my fists are just about as big as your head. You know what this fist is going to feel like when it hits, little man? Elliot had a pretty good idea of what it would feel like, and he was sweating under his arms and in the small of his back, but he didn't move. He didn't respond to the stranger's taunting. It's gonna feel like a freight train ramming straight through you. Stop being so damn stubborn. They were going to great lengths to avoid using violence, which confirmed Elliot's suspicion that they wanted to leave him unmarked, so that later his body would bear no cuts or bruises incompatible with suicide. The bear who would be manned shambled toward him. You want to change my mind? Be cooperative? Elliot held his ground. One good punch in the belly, and you'll be puking your guts out on your shoes. Another step. And when you're done puking your guts out, I'm going to grab you by your balls and drag you over to the table. One more step. Then the big man stopped. They were only an arm's length apart. Elliot glanced at Bob, who was still standing at the kitchen table, a packet of syringes in his hands. Last chance to do it the easy way, Vince said. In one smooth, lightning fast movement, Elliot seized the measuring cup into which he poured 4 ounces of vinegar a few minutes ago. He threw the contents in Vince's face. The big man cried out in surprise and pain, temporarily blinded. Elliot dropped the measuring cup and seized the gun, but Vince's reflectively squeezed off a shot that breezed past Elliot's face and smashed the window behind the sink. Elliot ducked. A wild roundhouse punch stepped in close, still holding on to the pistol that the other man wouldn't surrender. He swung one arm around, slamming his bent elbow into Vince's throat. The big man's head snapped back. Elliot chopped the exposed Adam's apple with the flat blade of his hand. He rammed his knee into his adversary's crotch and tore the gun out of the bare paw hand as those clenching fingers went slack. Vince bent forward, gagging, and Elliot slammed the butt of the gun against the side of his head with a sound like stone meeting stone. Elliot stepped back. Vince dropped to his knees and then onto his face. He stayed there, tongue kissing the floor tiles. The entire battle had taken less than 10 seconds. The big man had been overconfident, certain that his 6-inch advantage in height and his extra 80 pounds of muscle made him unbeatable. He had been wrong. Elliot swung toward the other intruder, pointing the confiscated pistol. Bob was already out of the kitchen, in the dining room, running toward the front of the house. Evidently he wasn't carrying a gun, and he was impressed by the speed and ease of which his partner had been taken out of action. Elliot went after him, but was slowed by the dining room chairs, which the fleeing man had overturned in his wake. In the living room, other furniture was knocked over, the books were strewn on the floor, the route to the entrance foyer was an obstacle course. By the time Elliot reached the front door and rushed out of the house, Bob had run the length of the driveway and across the street. He was climbing into a dark green, unmarked Chevy sedan. Elliot got to the street in time to watch the Chevy pull away, tires squealing, engine roaring. He couldn't get the license plate. The plates were smeared with mud. He hurried back to the house. The man was still unconscious, and would probably remain that way for another 10 or 15 minutes. Elliot checked his pulse and pulled back one of his eyelids. Vince would survive, although he would need hospitalization. He wouldn't be able to swallow without pain for days to come. Elliot went through the thug's pockets. He had found some small chains, a comb, a wallet, and the sheaf of papers on which were the typed questions that Elliot had been expected to answer. He folded the pages and stuffed them into his hip pocket. Vince's wallet contained $92, no credit cards, no driver's license, no identification of any kind. Definitely not FBI. Borough men carried the proper credentials. Not CIA either. CIA operatives were loaded with ID, even if it was a phony name. As far as Elliot was concerned, the absence of ID was more sinister than the collection of patently false papers that would have been, because this absolute anonymity smacked of a secret police organization. Secret police. Such a possibility scared the hell out of Elliot. Not in the good old US of A. Surely not. In China, in New Russia, in Iran or Iraq, yes. In the South American Banana Republic, yes. In half the countries in the world there were secret polices, modern Gestapos, and citizens lived in the fear of the late night knock on the door. But not in America, damn it. If the government had established a secret police force, however, why was it so anxious to cover up the true facts of Danny's death? What were they trying to hide about the Sierra tragedy? What really happened up in those mountains? Tina. Suddenly he realized she was in danger. If these people were determined to kill him just to stop the exhumation, they would have to kill Tina. In fact, she must be their primary target. He ran to the kitchen phone, snatched up the headset, and realized that he didn't know her number. He quickly leafed through the telephone directory, but there was no listing for Christina Evans. He would never be able to con an unlisted number out of the directory assistance operator. By the time he called the police and managed to explain this situation, they might be too late to help Tina. Briefly he stood in terrible indecision, incapacitated by the prospect of losing Tina. He thought of her slightly crooked smile, her eyes as quick and deep and cool and blue as the pure mountain stream. The pressure in his chest grew so great that he couldn't catch his breath. As he remembered her address, she had given it to him 2 nights ago at the party after the premier of of magic. She didn't live far from him. He could be at her place in 5 minutes. Still, he had the silencer-equipped pistol in his hand, and he decided to keep it. He ran to the car in the driveway. Next chapter. Things are picking up, guys. Now we have some interesting secret organization involved. Trying to get them to stop digging. It's all happening so fast. Alright, next chapter. Tina left a repairman from the gas company in the garage and returned to Danny's room. She took the graphic novel out of the carton and sat on the edge of the bed in the tarnished copper sunlight that fell like a shower of pennies through the window. The magazine contained half a dozen illustrated horror stories. The one from which the cover painting had been drawn was 16 pages long, and letters that were supposed to look like as if they had been formed from a rotting shroud cloth. The artist had embossed the title across the top of the first page about a somber, well-detailed scene of a rain-swept graveyard. Tina stared at the words in shocked disbelief. The boy who was not dead. She thought of the words on the chalkboard and on the computer printout. Not dead, not dead, not dead. Her hands shook. She had trouble holding the magazine steady enough to read. The story was set in a mid-19th century, when a physician's perception of the thin line between life and death was often cloudy. It was a tale of a boy, Kevin, who fell off a roof and took a bad knock on the head, therefore slipping into a deep coma. The boy's vital signs were undetectable to the technology of that era. The doctor pronounced him dead, and his grieving parents committed Kevin to the grave. In those days, the corpse was not embalmed, therefore the boy was buried while still alive. Kevin's parents went away from the city immediately after the funeral, intending to spend a month at their summer house in the country, where they could be free of the press of business and social duties to better mourn their lost child. But the first night in the country, the mother received a vision in which Kevin was buried alive and calling for her. The vision was so vivid, so disturbing, that she and her husband raced back to the city that very night to have the grave reopened at dawn. But Death decided that Kevin belonged to him because the funeral had been already held and because the grave had also been closed. Death was determined that the parents would not reach the cemetery in time to save their son. Most of the story dealt with Death's attempt to stop the mother and father on their desperate night journey. They were assaulted by every form of the waking dead, every manner of living corpse and vampire, ghoul, zombie, and ghost. But they triumphed. They arrived at the grave by dawn, had it open, found their son alive, released from his coma. The last panel of the illustrated story showed the parents and the boy walking out of the graveyard while Death watched them leave. Death was saying, "Only a temporary victory. You'll be mine sooner or later. You'll be back someday. I'll be waiting for you." Tina was dry-mouthed, weak. She didn't know what to make of the damn thing. This was just a silly comic book, an absurd horror story, yet Strange parallels existed between this gruesome tale and the recent ugliness in her own life. She put the magazine aside, covered down, so she wouldn't have to meet death's wormy, red-eyed gaze. The boy who was not dead. It was weird. She had dreamed that Danny was buried alive. Into her dream, she had incorporated a grisly character from an old issue of a horror comics magazine that was in Danny's collection. The lead story in this issue was about a boy, approximately Danny's age, mistakenly pronounced dead, then buried alive, and then exhumed. Coincidence? Yeah, sure. Just about as coincidental as sunrise following sunset. Crazily, Tina felt as if her nightmare had not come from within her, but from without, as if some person or force had projected the dream into her mind in an effort to what? To tell her that Danny had been buried alive? Impossible. He could not have been buried alive. The boy had been battered, burned, frozen, horribly mutated in the crash, dead beyond any shadow of doubt. That's what both the authorities and the mortician had told her. Furthermore, this was not the mid-19th century. These days, doctors could detect even the vaguest heartbeat, the shallowest respiration, the dimmest traces of brainwave activity. Danny certainly had been dead when they had buried him. And if, by some 1,000,000 to 1 chance, the boy had been alive when he had been buried, why would it take an entire year for her to receive a vision from the spirit world? This last thought profoundly shocked her. The spirit world, visions, clairvoyant experiences, she didn't believe any of that psychic supernatural stuff. At least she had always thought she didn't believe in it. Yet now she was seriously considering the possibilities that her dream had some otherworldly significance. This was sheer claptrap, utter nonsense. The roots of all dreams were to be found in the store of experiences in the psyche. Dreams were not sent like telegrams from the spirits or gods or demons. Her sudden gullibility dismayed and alarmed her, because it indicated that the decision to have Danny's body exhumed was not having the stabilizing effect on her emotions that she had hoped it would. Tina got up from bed and went to the window and gazed at the street, the palms, the olive trees. She had to concentrate on the indisputable facts, rule out all the nonsense about the dream having been sent by some outside force. It was her dream, entirely of her making. But what about the horror comic? As far as she could see, only one rational explanation presented itself. She must have glimpsed the grotesque figure of death on the cover of the magazine when Danny first brought the issue home from the newsstand. Except that she knew she hadn't. And even if she had seen the color illustration before, she knew damn well that she hadn't read the story, The Boy Who Was Not Dead. She had paged through only 2 of the magazines Danny had bought, the first 2, when she was trying to make up her mind about whether such unusual reading material could have any harmful effects on him. From the date on its cover, she knew that the issue containing The Boy Who Was Not Dead couldn't be one of the first pieces in Danny's collection. It had been published only 2 years ago, long after she had decided that comic books were harmless. Well, she was back where she started. Her dream had been patterned after the images in the illustrated horror story. That seemed indisputable. But she hadn't read the story until a few minutes ago. That was fact as well. Frustrated and angry at herself for her inability to solve the puzzle, she turned to the window. She went back to the bed to have another look at the magazine which she had left there. The gas company workman called from the front of the house, startling Tina. He found him waiting by the front door. "I'm finished. I just wanted to let you know I was going so you could lock the door behind me." "Everything all right?" "Oh yeah, sure. Everything here is in great shape. If there's a gas leak in the neighborhood, it's not anywhere on your property." She thanked him. He said he was only doing his job. They both said, "Have a nice day," and she locked the door after he left. She returned to Danny's room and picked up the magazine, death glaring hungrily at her from the cover. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she read the story again, hoping to see something important in it that she had overlooked in the first reading. 3 or 4 minutes later, the doorbell rang. 1, 2, 3, 4 times insistently. Carrying the magazine, she went to answer the bell. It rang 3 more times during the 10 seconds that she took to reach the front door. "Damn, don't be so damn impatient," she muttered. To her surprise, through the fish-eye lens, she saw Elliot on the stoop. When she opened the door, he came in fast, almost in a crouch, glancing past her left, right, toward the living room, then toward the dining area, speaking rapidly, urgently. "Are you okay? You all right?" "I'm fine. What's wrong with you? Are you alone?" "Not now that you're here." He closed the door, locked it. "Pack a suitcase." "What? I don't think it's safe for you to be here." "Elliot, is that a gun?" "Yeah, it was." "A real gun?" "Yeah, I took it off the guy who tried to kill me." She was more able to believe that he was joking than he had been really in danger. "What man? What?" "A few minutes ago at my place." "But, listen, Tina. They wanted to kill me just because I was going to help you get Danny's body exhumed." She gaped at him. "What are you talking about?" "Murder, conspiracy, something damn strange. They probably intend to kill you too. But that's crazy, I know. But it's true. Elliot, can you pack a suitcase fast?" At first, she half believed that he was trying to be funny, playing a game to amuse her, and she was going to tell him that none of this struck her as funny. But she stared into his dark, expressive eyes, and she knew that he meant every word he said. "My God, Elliot, did someone really try to kill you?" "I'll tell you about it later. Are you hurt?" No. We ought to lay low until we can figure this out." "Did you call the police?" "I'm not sure that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Maybe they're a part of it somehow." "Part of it? The cops?" "Where do you keep your suitcases?" She felt dizzy. "Where are we going?" "I don't know yet, but come on, hurry, let's get you packed. And let's get the hell out of here before more guys show up." "I have suitcases in my bedroom closet." He put a hand against her back, gently but firmly urging her out of the foyer. She headed for the master bedroom, confused and beginning to be frightened. He followed her close behind. "Has anyone been around here this afternoon?" "Just me. I mean, anyone snooping around? Anyone at the door?" "No. I can't figure out why they'd come for me first." "Well, there was the gas guy," Tina said as she hurried down the short hall toward the master bedroom. "The what?" "A repairman from the gas company." Tina put his hand on her shoulder, stopped her, and turned around just as they entered the bedroom. "A gas company workman?" "Yes. Don't worry, I asked to see his credentials." Elliot frowned. But it's a holiday. He was an emergency crewman. What emergency? They lost some pressure in the gas lines. They think there might be a leak in the neighborhood. The furrows in Elliot's brow grew deeper. What did the workman need to see you for? He wanted to check my furnace, make sure there wasn't any gas escaping. You didn't let him in? Sure. He had an ID, a photo ID card from the gas company. He checked the furnace and it was okay. When was this? He left just a couple of minutes before you came in. How long was he here? 20 minutes? 15 minutes? It took him that long to check out the furnace? He wanted to be thorough, he said. Were you with him the whole time? No, I was cleaning out Danny's room. Where's your furnace? In the garage. Show me. What about the suitcases? There may not be time, he said. He was pale. Fine beads of sweat had popped out along his hairline. She felt the blood drain from his face. She said, Oh my God, you don't think... The furnace! This way. Still carrying the magazine, she rushed through the house, past the kitchen, into the laundry room. The door stood at the far end of a narrow rectangular work area. As she reached the knob, she smelled the gas in the garage. Don't open that door! She snatched her hand off the knob as if she had already picked up a tarantula. The latch might cause a spark. Let's get the hell out. The front door. Come on, fast. They hurried back the way they came. Tina pressed a leafy green plant, past a leafy green plant, a 4-foot-high that she had owned since it was only 1/4 as tall as it was now, and she had the insane urge to stop and risk getting caught in the coming explosion just long enough to pick up the plant and take it with her. But an image of crimson eyes, yellow skin, the leering face of death flashed through her mind, and she kept moving. She tightened her grip on the horror comic magazine in her left hand. It was important that she not lose it. In the foyer, Elliot jerked open the front door, pushed through ahead of him, and they both plunged into the late night afternoon sunshine. Into the street, Elliot urged. A blood-freezing image rose in the back of her mind, the house torn apart by a colossal blast, the shrapnel of wood and glass, metal whistling toward her. Hundreds of sharp fragments piercing her from head to toe. The flagstone walk that led across her front yard seemed to be one of those treadmill pathways in a dream, stretching out further in front of her the harder she ran, but at last she reached the end of it and dashed onto the street. Elliot's Mercedes was parked at the far curb. She was 6 or 8 feet from the car when the sudden outward sweeping shock of the explosion shoved her forward. She stumbled and fell into the side of the sports car, banging her knee painfully. Twisting around in terror, she called Elliot's name. He was safe, close behind her, knocked off balance by the force of the shock wave, staggering forward but unhurt. The garage had gone up first, the big door ripped from its hinges, splintering into the driveway, the roof dissolving into a confetti shower of shingles and flaming debris. But even as Tina looked from Elliot to the fire before all the shingles had fallen back to earth, the second explosion slammed through the house, and a billowing cloud of flame roared from one end of the structure to the other, bursting those few windows that had miraculously survived the first blast. Tina watched, stunned, as flames leapt from the window of the house and ignited dry palm fronds on a nearby tree. Elliot pushed her away from the Mercedes so that he could open the door to the passenger's side. Get in quick. My house is on fire. You can't save it now. We have to wait for the fire company. The longer we stand here, the bigger targets we make. He grabbed her arm, swung her away from the burning house, the sight of which affected her as much as if it had been a hypnosis, slowly swinging pocket watch. For God's sake, Tina, get in the car. Let's go before the shooting starts. Frightened, dazed by the incredible speed at which her world had begun to disintegrate, she did as he said. When she was in the car, he shut the door, ran to the driver's side, and climbed in behind the steering wheel. Are you all right? He asked. She nodded dumbly. At least we're still alive, he said. He put the pistol in his lap, the muzzle facing toward the door away from Tina. The keys were in the ignition. He started the car. His hands were shaking. Tina looked out the side window, watching in disbelief as the flames spread from the shattered garage roof to the main roof of the house. Long tongues of lambent fire licking, hungry, blood red in the last orange light of the afternoon. Next chapter already, guys. As Elliot drove away from the burning house, his instinctual sense of danger was as sensitive as it was in his military days. He was on a thin line that separated animal alertness from nervous frenzy. He glanced at the rearview mirror and saw a black van pull away from the curve half a block behind them. We're being followed, he said. Tina had been looking back at her house. Now she turned all the way around and stared through the rear window of the sports car. I'll bet the bastard who triggered my furnace is in that truck. Probably. If I could get my hands on the son of a bitch, I'm gonna gorge his eyes out. Her fury surprised and pleased Elliot, stupefied by the unexpected violence, by the loss of her house, and by her close brush with death. She had seemed to be in a trance now. Now she had snapped out of it. He was encouraged by her resilience. Put on your seatbelt. We'll be moving fast and loose, he said. She faced front and buckled up. Are you going to try to lose him? I'm not going to try. Not going to just try. In this residential neighborhood, the speed limit was 25 miles per hour. Elliot tramped on the accelerator and the low, sleek, two-seat Mercedes jumped forward. Behind them, the van dwindling rapidly until it was a block and a half away, and then it stopped dwindling as it also accelerated. He can't catch up with us, Elliot said. The best he can hope is to avoid losing more ground. Along the street, people came out of their house, seeking the source of the explosion. The heads turned as the Mercedes rocketed past. When Elliot rounded the corner 2 blocks away, he braked from 60 miles an hour to make the turn. The tires squealed and the car slid sideways, but the superb suspension and responsive steering held the Mercedes firmly on 4 wheels all the way through the arc. You don't think they'll actually start shooting at us? Tina asked. Hell if I know. They want it to appear as if you died in an accidental gas explosion. And I think they had a fake suicide plan for me too. And now that they know we're onto them, they might panic, they might do anything, I don't know. The only thing I do know is they can't just let us walk away. But who? I'll tell you what I know, but later. What do they have to do with Danny? Later, he said impatiently. But it's also crazy, you're telling me. He wheeled around another corner and then another, trying to disappear from the men in the van long enough to leave them with so many choices of streets to follow that they would have to give up the chase in confusion. Too late. He saw the sign at the fourth intersection. Not a through street, but they were already around the corner and headed down the narrow dead end with nothing but a row of 10 modest stucco houses on each side. Damn, better back out, she said, and run right into them. You've got the gun. There's probably more than one of them, and they'll be armed. At the fifth house on the left, the garage was open and there wasn't a car inside. We've got to get off the street and out of sight, Elliot said. He drove into the open garage as boldly as if it was his own. He switched off the engine, scrambled out of the car, and ran to the big door. It wouldn't come down. He struggled with it for a moment, and then he realized it was equipped with an automatic system. Behind him, Tina said, "Stand back." She'd gotten out of the car and had located the control button on the garage wall. He glanced outside up the street, and he couldn't see the van. The door rumbled down, concealing them from anyone who might drive past. Elliot went to her. That was close. He took her in her hands, squeezed. Her hand was cold, but for her firm was grip. So who the hell are they? She asked. I saw Harold Kennebec, the judge I mentioned. The door that connected the garage to the house opened without warning, but with a sharp, dry squeak of unoiled hinges. An imposing barrel-chested man in rumpled chinos and a white t-shirt snapped on the garage light and peered curiously at them. He had meaty arms. The circumference of one of them almost equaled the circumference of Elliot's thigh, but it wasn't the shirt that could be buttoned easily around his thick, muscular neck. He appeared formidable, even with his beer belly, which bulged over the waistband of his trousers. First Vince, and now this specimen. This was a day of giants. Who are you? The behemoth asked in a soft, gentle voice that didn't quite equate with his appearance. Elliot had the awful feeling that this guy would reach for the button Tina had pressed less than a minute ago, and that the garage door would lift just as the black van was rolling slowly down the street. Stalling for time, he said, "Oh, hi, my name's Elliot, and this is Tina." "Tom," the big man said. "Tom Holumby." Tom didn't appear to be worried by the presence in his garage. He seemed merely perplexed. A man of his size probably wasn't frightened any more easily than Godzilla confronted by a pathetic, bazooka-wielding soldier surrounding doomed Tokyo. "Nice car," Tom said, with an unmistakable trace of reverence in his tone. He gazed at the S600. Elliot almost laughed. Nice car. They'd pulled into this guy's garage, parked, closed the door, bold as you please, and all he has to say was, "Nice car?" A very nice little number, Tom said, licking his lips as he studied the Mercedes. Apparently Tom couldn't conceive that burglars, psychopathic killers, and lowlifes were permitted to purchase a Mercedes-Benz if they had the money for it. To him, evidently anyone who drove a Mercedes had to be the right kind of people. Elliot wondered how Tom would have reacted if they had shrieked into his garage in an old, battered Chevy. Pulling his gaze from the car, Tom said, "What are you doing here?" There was still neither suspicion nor belligerence in his voice. "We're expected," Elliot said. I wasn't expecting nobody." "We're here about the boat," Elliot said, not even knowing where he was going to go with that line, ready to say something, anything to keep Tom from putting the garage door and throwing the back up. Tom blinked. The boat? The 24-footer. The 20-footer. I don't only own a 20-footer. The one with the Evinrude motor. Nothing like that here. You must be mistaken, Elliot said. I figure you got the wrong place, Tom said, stepping out of the doorway into the garage, reaching for the button that would raise the big door. Tina said, Mr. Palumbi, wait. There must be some mistake. Really, this is definitely the right place. Tom stopped short of the button. Tina continued. You're just not the man we're supposed to see, that's all. He probably forgot to tell you about the boat. Elliot blinked at her, amazed by her natural facility for deception. Who's this guy you're supposed to see? Tom asked, frowning. Appearing to be somewhat amazed herself, Tina hesitated not at all before she said, Saul Fitzpatrick. Nobody here by that name. But this is the address he gave us. He said the garage would be open and then we were to pull right inside. Elliot wanted to hug her. Yeah, Saul said we were to pull in out of the driveway so that he'd have a place to put the boat when he got here with it. Tom scratched his head, then pulled on one ear. Fitzpatrick? Yeah. Never heard of him. What's he bringing the boat here for, but anyway? We're buying it from him, Tina said. No, I mean, why here? Tom shook his head. Well, the way we understand it is this was where he lived. But he doesn't. I live here, Tom said. Me and my wife and our little daughter, we're out right now. And there's no one ever been here named Fitzpatrick. Well, why would he tell us this was his address? Tina asked. Lady, I don't have the foggiest idea, unless maybe, did you already pay him for the boat? Well, maybe it's just a down payment? We did give him $2,000 on deposit, Elliot said. It was a refundable deposit. Yeah, so just to hold the boat until we could see it and make up our minds. Smiling, Tom said, I think the deposit might not turn out to be as refundable as you thought. Pretending surprised, Tina said, You don't mean Mr. Fitzpatrick would cheat us? Obviously, it pleased Tom to think that people who could afford a Mercedes were not so smart after all. If you gave him a deposit, and if he gave you this address and claimed he lived here, then it's not very likely this Saul Fitzpatrick even owns any boat in the first place. Damn, Elliot said. We were swindled, Tina said, feigning shock, buying time. Grinning broadly now, Tom said, Well, you can look at it that way if you want, or you can think of it as an important lesson. This here Fitzpatrick fellow taught ya. Swindled. Tina shaking her head. Sure as the sun will come up tomorrow, Tom said. Tina turned to Elliot. What do you think? Elliot glanced at the door, then at his watch, and said, I think it's safe to leave. Safe? Tom asked. Tina stepped lightly past Tom and pressed the button that raised the garage door. She smiled at her bewildered host and went to the passenger side of the car while Elliot opened the driver's door. Tom looked from Elliot to Tina to Elliot, puzzled. Safe? Elliot, I sure hope it is, Tom. Thanks for your help. He got in the car and backed out of the garage. Any amusement he felt at the way they had handled Tom evaporated instantly as he reversed warily out of the sanctuary, down the driveway, and into the street. He sat stiffly behind the wheel, clenching his teeth, wondering if a bullet would crack through the windshield and shatter his face. He wasn't accustomed to this tension. Physically, he was still hard, tough, but mentally and emotionally, he was softer than he had been in his prime. A long time had passed since his years in military intelligence, since the nights of fear in the Persian Gulf and in countless cities scattered around the Mid East and Asia. Then he had had the resilience of youth and had been less burdened with respect for death than he was now. In those days, it was easy to play the hunter. He had taken pleasure in stalking human prey. Hell, there had even been a measure of joy in being stalked, for it gave him the opportunity to prove himself by outwitting the hunter on his trail. Much had changed. He was soft, a successful civilized attorney, living the good life. He had never expected to play that game again. But once more, incredibly, he was being hunted, and he wondered how long he could survive. Tina glanced both ways along the street as Elliot swung the car out of the driveway. No black van, she said, so far. Several blocks to the north, an ugly column of smoke rose into the twilight sky from what was left of Tina's house. Night black, the upper reaches tinted around the edges by the last pinkish rays of the setting sun. As he drove from the residential street to another, steadily heading away from the smoke, working toward the major throughway, Elliot expected to encounter the black van at every intersection. Tina appeared to be no less pessimistic about their hope of escape than he was. Each time he glanced at her, she was either crouched forward, squinting at every new street they entered, or twisted halfway around in her seat, looking at the rear window. Her face was drawn, and she was biting her lower lip. However, by the time they reached Charleston Boulevard, via Maryland Parkway, Sahara Avenue, and the Las Vegas Boulevard, they began to relax. They were far from Tina's neighborhood now. No matter who was searching for them, no matter how large the organization pitted against them, the city was too big to harbor danger for them in every nook and crevice. With more than 1 million full-time residents, with more than 20 million tourists a year, and with a vast desert on which to sprawl, Vegas offered thousands of dark, quiet corners where two people on the run could safely stop to catch their breath and settle upon a course of action. At least that's what Elliot wanted to believe. Where to? Tina asked as Elliot turned west on Charleston Boulevard. Let's ride this out for a few miles and talk. We've got a lot to discuss, plans to make. What plans? How to stay alive. Hey guys, I think we're gonna save the rest for next time. I know they're being chased. Things are happening. Oh no, who are these people? We have lots of questions. Hopefully we'll get those answers next time. So, as I had mentioned, this is not a very long book, and we are more than halfway through. So, I'm guessing just a few more nights of reading and we'll be through the story. So, with that knowledge, we can assume that things will really pick up next time. We've got some more mystery ahead of us. And, yeah, so we'll be back at it on Thursday and Friday, same time, and see how far along we get. I will. I will read more after this novel. In fact, we are open to suggestions, um, but preferably, you know, relatively short stories, not uh, not anything that's going to take us, too many weeks to get through. And yeah, I will probably look at a few of our options. Now, other genres are open to other genres as well. I will tell you that I do have a book in mind that I haven't looked at how it's written. That's another thing that I'll probably do is just kind of skim through some of our different recommendations as they come up and see how the rhythm and the reading might end up being, and you know how we can go about setting up the right ambience to get us in the mood for the story and that sort of thing too. So, we'll put a little bit of thought into our selection process. But as I had mentioned, there is a book that I am thinking of reading next, and it's called The Plague, and it's actually, there's a couple of different books out there called The Plague with a title like that. No surprise. But this one is written by an author. Actually, it takes place in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, which is where I'm from. And it's written by Kevin Chong, and it's called The Plague, and it is, it takes place in Vancouver, the storyline does, so I thought it might be interesting to check it out. It says the setting is Vancouver, Canada in the near future. But I'll have a look to see a little bit more about this particular story, and it doesn't look like it's very long either, so yeah. Open to some suggestions, any particular genre, and once it has been decided what book we'll read next, and we will hopefully be able to put some time into creating a nice little visual scene as well to fit the and set the stage. So, I am Canadian, yes, and but I lived in the States for a long time and have recently just moved back to Canada. Things are interesting. So yeah, that's probably about the best way to put it. Trying to stay optimistic about things, but it's, just like much of the US, things are getting a little bit intense. So yeah. Yes, we'll see what wonderful visuals Fab is able to pull together for the next one as well. Try to keep it simple. I like to have all of my stream graphics to be fairly simple as well, but quality too. That'll be that to look forward to. But anyhow, thanks again, and hopefully you'll join us for next Thursday and Friday, same time. I've been trying to make sure that I upload the VODs from my Twitch channel onto YouTube as well, because I know a lot of people that I know personally can't stop by the stream, and so I wanted to give them that option to be able to listen to the VODs when they have time, but on YouTube, because I still know a lot of people who haven't figured out Twitch. So anytime I give them the Twitch link, they're like, "What do I do?" Oh my gosh. Anyhow, it's it is what it is. So does Fab read as well? Is that what you're asking? It's actually interesting that you should ask about that if that's what you're asking. But we were thinking of maybe reading together, um, depending on the storyline. Like, in, you know, if we had, um, you know, an opportunity to, like, read the different characters' storylines, if that's, you know, how the novel is written, or do the back and forth on the dialogue if it's, you know, female, male characters, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah, so we'll see. I I only just threw the idea out there to him the other day, and so we'll let him think about that a little bit more and get comfortable with the idea. And yeah, I'd like us to read together and create just a little bit more of a different kind of a situation. I don't think I know anybody else who's doing that where they're, you know, two people are reading and you know, other than like, you know, professional audiobooks and whatnot. So, and we're definitely not professionals in that sense. I just like to read out loud for my own pleasure and just yeah, I mean, I hope to, you know, polish my reading aloud a little bit more, and this gives me that opportunity to do what I enjoy, share it with others, you know, go back to reading books as well. And that seems to be a lost hobby, a dying hobby, a passion. So, but yeah, no, I have plenty of books that I love to read, and I like to read out loud, and yeah. So it would be a cool idea. And yeah, like I said, I don't think I've seen anyone doing that on Twitch yet. Yes. In Fab's other life, he was a physicist. Yes, indeed. Yeah, we were talking about many things while you were gone. Now that ASMR Lover 007 has all of your life details. Anyhow, okay. Signing off for today. You guys can get to know each other a little bit more next time. Alright. Be safe out there, and we will look forward to seeing what happens in the upcoming chapters. Alright, see you on Thursday for some more reading. Bye-bye.